This week, we welcome Merlin Namuth, former Chief Information Security Officer and Program Committee member at RSA Conference. In the Leadership and Communications section, 2 big reasons that digital transformations fail. DevSecOps model requires security get out of its comfort zone. 3 things CIOs should discuss with the CEOs to optimize cybersecurity and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 148, recorded October 21st, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in G-Unit Studios with my co-host, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Always fun to be in studio. And I was hoping to be here also with Jason, but Jason Albuquerque is joining us remotely today. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous. Wish I was having a cigar with you guys, but I'm here from BSW Studio South, 25 minutes south of G Unit.
Well, we're all in the same state. We'll have to figure out how we get together this week. Yes. The new Security Weekly website is officially live. Visit securityweekly.com to check out all of our new sorting and filtering functionality. Please let us know if you find any issues or have any feedback by sending an email to website@securityweekly.net. I did find a couple issues with redirects I fixed today. Just little things, right? But I think we got most of the bugs worked out of it now, and the viewers I've gotten feedback from absolutely love the new website. Also, please help us with 2 surveys. Use the survey drop-down on the new website and select 2019 Listener Survey to give us your annual feedback, or 5 stages of automation maturity to help us measure your degree of security automation. Both sets of surveys will be presented in webcasts. The automation maturity one will be in November, and we'll probably do our listener one in January when we get all the results in. All right. Merlin Namuth is a former CISO. Merlin has over 24 years of experience, with the last 21 years focused on security. His experience includes building and running numerous security programs, program management, managing incident response teams, computer forensics, compliance architecture, and engineering complex security solutions. Merlin serves on the Cyber Risk Advisory Board at Pepperdine University, where he also guest lectures. Merlin serves on the board of directors at I Emphasize, a nonprofit focused on educating people about human trafficking. Merlin, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Merlin, you and I met a couple months back. Yeah, you're a Colorado guy. Yeah, Colorado guy. You're up in Golden today. I'm actually in studio, not my Colorado office today. I always like to start. How'd you get your start in security?
So it's interesting. So I'll even go even further back before security, because I started off in IT for about 3 years before I made the switch into security. So way back when I was in college, I was working in the student computer lab. This was in my undergrad university. And so this was back in the Novell 3 days. And so it was, I was supporting users, WordPerfect for DOS, clearing printer jams, things like that. And then when I went to graduate school right after undergrad, I got a job where I was helping the social work department on campus get connected onto the campus network. That summer, right before I started, they had just gotten wired up for Ethernet. And so I was helping get the systems all communicating and help professors and supporting staff members be able to know what to do with this new technology. So after I graduated, I went into IT, and I was started off supporting laser printers for IBM, and then I just kind of progressed from there. And how I really got my start in security was I took a Checkpoint firewall class. So I think this was Checkpoint version 4.0, so way back in the day. And when I took that class, I was like, whoa, I kind of like this, and I want more of this. And so that was in about the late 90s when I got into security. And so ever since then, just have progressing roles as an individual contributor. And then about 10 years ago, made the switch over to management to lead teams and build programs.
Yeah.
Also, we have something in common. I started at Checkpoint, probably a similar version running on Solaris, right? Or if you were lucky, you got the IPSO platform, which was way better.
Oh my gosh, that was like such a blessing because I don't know about you, Paul, but when you go through a Checkpoint upgrade and you run out disk space on your Sun Ultra 5, it's like then Nokia was like, whoa, this is like awesome that you have these different images that you can revert back to.
Oh yeah, it was a total game changer back in the day.
Oh, and similar to me, I started in nuclear power on the computer side, the support unit, and we were pulling fiber through the plants to bring in all the IOs to run the control room, and I was still doing the old taps, right? You used to have the old cables where you used to put the taps in them.
Oh, the vampire.
Yeah, the vampire taps.
Yeah.
And then, coax cable, like in the back of computers.
Yep,
oh, yeah. I mean, that was back in the day. And on the security front, Checkpoint Firewall 1 was the first platform I was actually trained on from a firewall platform. I did a bunch of antivirus before that. But, yeah, similar starts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, as a CISO, right, you were in that role for a while. You're not currently in that role. But, I mean, if you think about some of the challenges you had to face in those early days of being in the management side, what are some of those big challenges you kind of saw that others can learn from in this role?
So I don't want to be too pessimistic. I have been in the industry for a long time, so I don't want to be a total curmudgeon. But, a lot of the problems I saw early on are still problems that we struggle with today, with good patch management, asset management, software management. If you look at like about the first 5 controls in the CIS standards, it's like, we still struggle with those. When I really focused on security, like in the early 2000s, is really, where I really made the switch and had full-time positions in security. It was much simpler then. It's like, I always joke around. That's like, we had firewall, we had antivirus, and maybe free snort for IDS, but even that was, kind of innovative at the time. But, we were struggling with, user awareness training back then, and I still see that as a struggle today. Patch management, I still see as a struggle. And one of the things that I've kind of caught myself doing is I was calling those things all basic controls, but I think that sends the wrong connotation. That basic means that they're easy. Those things are actually very difficult to do. And so I started calling those, more foundational, which really, aligns to, how CIS calls those first few controls as well. But, you got to get the foundation in place before you, start doing threat hunting and, pursuing zero trust, and things like that.
Yeah, one of the challenges that I've seen in the industry is we kind of chase the new stuff a little bit, right? We see these new technologies or we see these new capabilities and we start going off after incident response, and you've got experience in incident response, right? We start thinking about, okay, I got to start correlating my logs and I got to start pulling all this threat intelligence data together and I got to build an effective incident response program, but yet I may not have done some of those early kind of foundational things like asset inventory and vulnerability detection and patching, which, if you think about that, we're not helping ourselves on the incident response side if I don't have some of those foundational things in place.
I mostly agree with that, with one caveat, and I won't take credit for this. Ed Scotus with SANS is the one who said this. So I don't know, about 15 years ago is when I took the incident handling course from Ed. And he said, his recommendation was when you go into a program, first thing you should have in place is an incident response program, because incidents are going to happen and you need to, be prepared for that. So I definitely agree with everything else you're saying, but I think that I agree with Ed, and I've seen that before. So, better be prepared than trying to handle an incident and try to put together an incident response program during an incident.
True. However, sometimes we jump to all these really latest and greatest technologies, but we don't sometimes know what's in the environment, know what we have to protect.
True.
No, exactly. I agree, Matt. I mean, it's one of those scenarios where, if we're chasing the next blinky light or the next new technology and we're neglecting the foundational items, we're not being proactive, right? Yes, a good incident response program, you need that. You have to have that. I would consider that tethered into your foundations, right? That's something you have to have. Along with patching and CMDB and asset management and knowing what you have within the environment, right? I kind of consider that one of those foundational items as well. But, unless we have a strong foundation, everything that's built upon that is going to be weak, including all of the net new technologies that we're trying to implement in our organization.
No, I definitely agree with you. And then I should further elaborate. So when I said that, it's not really the incident response program per se, because I definitely agree. You have to have you have to know what you're trying to protect and where to look for if you have an intrusion or attack on your environment. So I'm referring to more like an incident response plan. So having a communications plan and maybe doing a tabletop so people are prepared for that. So when I put together an incident response program, I have both an incident response plan and I also refer to as an incident response procedure. So the procedure is much more detailed, and I think that's a little bit more what you're alluding to, is that you have like the URL for your firewall, and you also have screenshots of like here's how to do a search, and here's search for different indicators that are happening in your environment, and so you have just more of that step-by-step technical process to be able to help people during a very stressful event, when an incident's happening, so people can refer to that and hopefully not make too many mistakes during the investigation.
Yeah, so I really like focusing on incident response first. I maybe it wasn't the very first thing I worked on in the university space, but it was one of the first things, and I thought it was the most valuable place to start because it, number one, identifies the players, right? Who are you going to, you can't do security all by yourself in the organization, right? There's other people, management, legal, audit, all of your systems administrators that have to be involved in the response to anything, really. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an incident, right? How do you respond to an audit? How do you respond to a vulnerability scan or any type of finding that could lead to an incident or an incident itself? The other thing it does is it makes everyone in your organization aware that they're part of security, right? They're being called into a meeting or part of a process that they're going to have to do something. And I think that's a really nice kind of first step.
Well, I think a lot of us in the early days, we were responding to incidents.
That was it. We were
right?
just responding.
I mean, we were constantly being reactive because we decided to take these really cool things called personal computers and connect them to this really cool thing called the internet. And then viruses and worms and everything hit, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, what do we do, right? And so incident was part of kind of how a lot of us got in the space, I think, early on, responding to these
Incidents
things.
were security. Back then, really, it's still largely today, but I mean, that was what raised awareness was the incidents. Yeah.
And you want to know, Paul, to your point, it put skin in the game for other business units, right? I mean, that's a big piece of what we talk about today, is collaborating with the business units, having them put some skin in the game, making sure it's a shared responsibility across the entire business. Incident response is one of those core pieces where you get skin in the game across the entire organization.
Yep.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I think another thing that helps with Jason is that, say you have like, I'll just pick like a project like, system hardening, for example, and you're getting pushback from the IT administrators to do that. Well, after they go through a tabletop exercise and they get an idea of how disruptive an incident is, lo and behold, you get more support from them because like, hey, all these projects you're working on, they're going to be on hold while you're working on an incident that could be, 3 or 6 months in duration.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think a lot of teams, to that point, and some questions folks have asked me when I've spoke about some of the DevOps type things that we've, even the ones small things we've implemented here, and they ask, how do you get approval from management to do that? I'm like, It's kind of easy in concept. Communicating that to your management and going through the process is the hard part. But in concept, the ability to implement and maintain security controls allows you to implement features and make bug fixes more quickly. That can translate into system administration. If it's system hardening and I implement a process to change and test configuration on systems, well, now I can deploy new systems more quickly, right? And I can make changes more quickly. The same thing with code. If I have a process for building and testing code in a repeatable, DevOps process, not only can I implement security, but now I can theoretically deploy more quickly and implement bugs more quickly, maybe saving myself some headache in the security aspect of it and allowing me more time to focus on bugs and features. But in both those examples, you're going to take that initial hit where you have to take that time out and go, I got to go build something before we start recognizing the return.
I completely agree. And I've seen that, in different programs where I've run where, you get that initial pushback because you're trying to do security, but then as you're starting to improve things, then the hygiene for IT, improves as well. And people really see the benefit of that.
Yeah, if everybody wants to be more operational efficient, then having ways to make them more operational efficient, which includes security and configuration and all the other things that we do, that's a positive outcome. It's just getting organizations to that point sometimes a little harder than we want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You also have an interesting story you want to talk about a little bit. One of the other challenges you've seen in the industry, a little bit around ego of security in their interaction with the rest of the business. I want you to tell that story a little bit, Merlin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm sure everyone on here is aware of the late Mike Asante. Mike was a good personal friend of mine. I really got to know him about 2 years ago when, and then about a year and a half ago when, actually about 2 years ago now, when he had reoccurrence of his cancer, and that's ended up taking his life this summer. But Mike was, a huge contributor to cybersecurity, in the industrial control security space, for example. So Mike was one of the first people to really raise the concerns for the vulnerabilities in the electrical grid. And he started raising these kind of concerns when he was still in the Navy. And then after that, he became the first CISO for NERC, and he was able to drive down, policies that way. And Mike spoke all around the world. And I have no idea. I don't think any one person knows, what all involvement Mike had and everything, because Mike was just very humble about his accomplishments. But he met with world leaders, around the world, and his work had such an impact. Really, when you think about it, his work really impacted everybody on the planet who has electricity, because it really raised the awareness of we have these vulnerabilities that we need to be concerned about and we should be addressing. So this summer, after Mike passed away, he was recognized on both floors of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, for his work in cybersecurity. And then later on in the summer, there was a memorial service, and where he and his family live is in a pretty rural part, and it's not a real easy place to get to. I had the opportunity to be able to go attend his service, as well as a lot of people, including a former Secretary of the Navy, came to his memorial service to speak about just the great things Mike did. And really, my point is that here's a guy who impacted our industry and people around the world in a very positive way in his work, and he's just very humble. And like I said, it's like I have no idea all the different world leaders he talked to or anything like that, because he didn't go around just strutting his stuff of look at me, look at what I'm doing. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that, because I think two things. It's like, one, we should go out there and try really hard to make a difference in cybersecurity. It's a very hard job. In some ways, we're not winning. Some ways we are. But and collectively, and it goes into my second point. Collectively, is we need to be working together. And if people are going around, beating their chest of look at me, look at all the great things I've done, that hampers innovation. Quite frankly, because other people aren't going to speak up because they're going to be like, oh, well, look at this person. I don't even measure up. But that person might have something very valuable to contribute. One of the things that I always tell people is that, I can learn from the most junior level person on my staff to the most senior level. I mean, everybody has something to contribute in cybersecurity, and I think we need to, really check our egos and just be open about allowing people to, speak about the things that they've learned, as well as being transparent and honest, be like, you know what? Vulnerability management is really hard. And does anybody like have any great ideas on how to improve that, for example?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, in an industry where we have limited resources and an interesting job market, we're trying to bring other people in to our industry. We want to be more inclusive. We want that diversity. But if we let egos get in the way, it could turn some people off from actually entering our space and actually helping us innovate and come up with newer, better solutions to problems we've been facing for 20 plus years.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's one of those scenarios where I think we need to be humble no matter what conversation we're having, right? In general, some of the struggles of security leaders is how do we build relationships across the business? You know, we need to check our ego at the door and realize that we're going to be learning from our peers, learning from other business leaders within our organizations, learning from other companies that we partner with. And then at the same time, you know, we have this small community of folks that we need to be tight with because, again, it's such a small community and we could be learning from each other. And when we bring egos into the door and when we bring, you know, a non-collaborative type mentality, you know, we're just doing a disservice to the entire community. We need to be better community-focused cybersecurity leaders in general, right? And that's it's how we penetrate the business, and that's how we build relationships across the business, but it's also how we collaborate with each other.
Well, I think even having a hierarchical structure like that, you should like just check that at the door, right? I mean, that's why we love going to community events and bringing different people on the show, is to just share ideas. Like, it doesn't matter like who's smarter, who's done this or done that. It doesn't matter. Let's just talk and share ideas, because someone may have a really good idea, and unless you're checking your ego at the door and listening to people, you're not going to get that, right?
No.
Yeah.
And you want to know, Paul? I think it's most important even in the worst of times.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So if we have a peer who's going through something that's very complicated, a breach, a cyber incident, something like that, that's when we should be reaching out the most. Lend a helping hand, right? Give someone to talk to, you know, a platform for them to vent, whatever the case may be. When we're in crisis, that's the most stressful time for CISOs and cybersecurity leaders. So that's when we should be reaching out the most.
You know, you know what helps me? I mean, other than Google occasionally fix my code more so than anyone, is people that don't have experience in programming. Because I'm like, I just need to talk this through, and they'll just bring an aspect oftentimes that I'm like, yeah, I was way overthinking that, or you know, something along those lines. It really kind of it helps you to have people of diverse backgrounds and experience. I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah, completely agree. But both on the technical side, and then Jason, you know, brings up more of the human aspect too. You know, call up someone and be like, "Hey, do you have a few minutes you can break away from your incident? I'll take you out to coffee and just sit there and just listen." I mean, like you said, going through, you know, I've you know worked many incidents in my career, and you know, they're always hard, you know, because there's new challenges that you didn't you know consider or even you know think about, and it's hard work, and you know thank you for bringing that up, because you know we really do need to be supporting each other, both technically and on the human level.
Yeah, and we have to build better relationships with the business anyways. I think one of the biggest challenges for CISOs these days is really understanding the business, understanding the goals of the business, and making sure we're aligning our security programs to not only help the business, but also make the business more secure. And if we're not having that dialogue in an effective way, we're never going to help the business at the end of the day really help them achieve their goals in a secure way. And that's a big challenge, I think, for all CISOs out there.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And that's the only way to get that seat at the table in the end, right? I mean, we need to be speaking the business of the language of the business, right? You know, if we can't sit in front of the CEO and explain a very technical aspect to what's happening in terms of risk or in terms of our goals for the business, we're not going to have that seat at the table for long, right? I mean, we need to be speaking the language of the business. We need to be those translators from the security folks on the ground to the board of directors office, right?
Yeah, and there's already enough egos in the board, right?
Well, that's you know very great points. And you know, I always tell people, like, whenever I start working in a new organization, running their security program, I spend the first couple months like going out to lunch almost every day, Like, hey, I'm going to take the head of legal out. I'm going to take the head of HR out, the head of marketing, and even, their subordinates, just to get to know people. So not only to understand the business, which is really important, for me to know what to secure and how to secure it, but also that you make that personal connection as well. Then when you run into somebody, you'd be like, hey, how'd your kid's soccer game go last weekend, and things like that. And those kind of connections, really, really do help break down barriers.
Yeah, bringing that human aspect into it. I do want to touch on your program committee side for RSA conference, right? RSA is coming up in a few months, early this year.
Yeah, it's earlier this year.
Yeah, when you sit on that program committee for a second, right? What are some of the topics that really interest you to bring into that environment? Because we see so much. We see so many different aspects of security these days. What are some of those areas you'd really like to see some more talks on? I think it would be really good for our audience, especially for the CISO audience, because I think they do like a CISO forum there at RSA as well. What are some of those topics you really want to see kind of brought into that environment to help educate not only the senior level audience, but even just, the rest of us lay people?
Yeah, and I attended the CISO boot camp last year. Last year was the first year that RSA had offered that, and really went into some of those more leadership type topics. So how do you communicate to your board? How do you put together metrics? And the metrics one is always interesting because everyone I talk to, their boards always want different things. So, there's real no standard of, what to provide for metrics. Some boards want, very technical, and other boards want a very high level. So, I found it very beneficial because I met several CISOs. So, now I have more CISOs to reach out to when I run into challenges I'm not quite sure, how to handle. So I can ask them for advice and how they've approached things. But it's also just a great forum for people just really, like I said, get to know each other and compare. Like, hey, I'm really running into this, and I have to, really credit RSA. I think they did a really good job of setting the expectations of that event really well, where people really were very open. I didn't, see the ego problem in that. So I think that's just, very beneficial there. So I think that, like I said, the more of those leadership type, communication, communicating the board, communicating with the executives, communicating with your peers. I mean, you can run into, that head of IT infrastructure that's going to be a roadblock. While the executives might be, hey, yeah, this sounds good, but then, it comes down to, executing that day to day. It's like, well, how do you, communicate with that, head of IT infrastructure who's like, man, my team is overwhelmed, and you're wanting me to do 5 more projects. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, and those communication skills are so important. I think the other one you just hit on was metrics, right? I think another big challenge in the industry is what are those right types of metrics that a CISO really needs to communicate to the executive team and the board on a periodic basis. I don't think there's any like de facto formula out there. I still see that as a really big challenge for CISOs in the industry.
Absolutely.
Metrics are hard.
They are.
Because it depends on your perspective, and you can twist numbers. They're just super hard.
Yeah, but I mean, look, reporting on how many vulnerabilities I have and and this, to me, aren't really effective metrics for the board and for the executive team. It might be great to kind of benchmark across the different businesses or to manage aspects of your program, but probably not a really good metric to take to the board, because they're not going to know whether I went down in vulnerabilities, up in vulnerabilities, my critical vulnerabilities.
I think time is important. Not so much the numbers themselves, right? Or if you can graph things over time, the accuracy of not accuracy in like you're lying about them, but what is a vulnerability, right? Could be a lot of different things. But if you're measuring the same way and you can show trends over time or break it down by department, those are a lot more useful, I think, for the board especially.
I completely agree. And then, Paul, it's so funny because I was going to bring up the trending aspect of it. But even, trending isn't the panacea for this either, because, if Microsoft happens to release, 60 new patches, Patch Tuesday, well, then all of a sudden your trend goes up of, number of vulnerabilities you have. So I think along with trending, you also have to have, good story to be able to tell along with that. So it's
Yeah,
not just
the
numbers.
The trending has to be balanced, right? You have to understand where the spikes are coming from, and then maybe trend a different way and say, every time Microsoft released patches, before they're remediated, that window is shrinking, right? Or we're doing a better job of prioritizing, based on that. So yeah, absolutely, there are factors where you have to take into account those variances.
One of the things I always tried to do when I talked about metrics, I'd love your take on this, Merlin, is how do you align your metrics to business goals? So a really simple one is, I want higher customer retention. Okay. Well, what does that mean from a security perspective? Well, that means I probably want to do a better job of protecting data. So where is customer data? And then how do I put controls in place to protect that data? And then how do I build a set of metrics to say, how am I doing with those controls that are protecting customer data that hopefully allows us to have higher customer retention, right? It's that linkage of a goal down through a set of objectives from a security perspective to controls and metrics. And I think sometimes creating those connections are hard because there's like no standard formula out there anywhere. When I used to do these presentations at Tenable, I'd pull in 3 or 4 different sources to kind of build a mapping. And I only built out a handful to demonstrate the point during a conversation, during a presentation. But we're talking hundreds of controls, and how do you align all those to those higher level business goals? That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and one of the things I've done is because I've worked for a few companies that were B2B, and so there's a lot of customer pressure to improve the security posture at my organization. And so what I would do is I'd present that to the board and be like, here's the pressure we're receiving from our clients, and here's what we're going to do about it. And so I'd align that to different projects. And so then at subsequent board meetings, then I'd present, here's where we're at with our projects. And so the board was really satisfied with that because I'd laid that foundation of what we needed to do. And then the board wanted updates of how we were doing to be able to meet that.
Right. And the metrics for each of those projects could change depending on the scope of what those projects were.
Exactly. Going back to, at the beginning of our time here, of that, the stuff's hard. It's like if I'm working on creating a good CMDB of my hardware assets, well, that might get delayed because of different reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Jason, did you have a question in there?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, with your point, Matt, every organization, number one, is different, right? So aligning to those business goals is going to vary depending on where you're working, right? What vertical you're in, what the risk tolerance of the organization is. But for security leaders to, again, get that seat at the table, keep that seat at the table, and earn the respect of the business, we need to be aligning to the goals of that business, right? So from my side of the house, the conversations I'm having with my CEO is, how did I enable opportunity? How did I assist in customer retention? How did I enable our sales team to have deeper, wider conversations with our clients, because security is part of those conversations? I'm at a point now where, I have a login to our CRM and I can tag myself to opportunities that I help drive for the business, because we're having conversations about secure managed services, secure project implementations, right? And how we're putting, secure by design philosophies within all of those processes and aspects and business units within our organization. So, that's what my CEO wants to hear. The amount of vulnerabilities, right, that's going to get me to have that conversation, but he doesn't want to hear the numbers. He wants to know, how we helped enable the business, how we helped, boost up those goals of the business.
Yeah, Very true. Merlin, couple recommendations for CISOs out there. Got a quick list for me?
I would say, definitely, keep educating yourself. Stuff changes all the time, as we all know. I mean, we've been saying that for 20 years. Now we have cloud, and we have lots of, challenges with cloud. So I would say, try to get budget, for yourself to be able to go to conferences. If you don't have budget for that, I live in the Denver area. We have I think almost every day of the week we have some sort of security event going on. There's a lot. And so, definitely pick and choose, what's going to be most beneficial to you. And network. you need that support. Going back to what Paul and I were both talking about of the people aspect as well as the technical aspect. So it's good. Like when I get in a tight situation, I can there's a lot of different people I can reach out to. Like send a text or call them or send an email, and it's really nice to have that because it's as I said, security is hard, and it's good to have that support. So I would say, network and keep educating yourself. And if you feel yourself getting burned out, find something that that really stimulates you, and maybe you need to take a break. Maybe go into consulting for a while, so you're not in charge of your own security program at company. So definitely keep be self-aware of where you're at personally with handling the stress and challenges of being a CISO.
Yeah, I think that's one of the toughest things to do is you're so in the in the role that sometimes the networking part and the education part are secondary to kind of running the day-to-day security program. Sometimes you forget about those other two aspects and really to help you not only expand your knowledge but who you can call on to help you when you're in a bind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jason, Paul, any additional questions while we have Merlin?
Good.
Merlin, thank you very much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate being able to share my thoughts and opinions.
Thank you. We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.